Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Lizzy Co. and the Artist's Way, featuring me, Lizzy Co. and The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. When last we spoke, we went over week 10 in the program, which talked about recovering a sense of self protection. So let's do the check in. And then I want to talk about one of the tasks for this past week because I really struggled with it and I think it's worth talking about with you all. So, check in first. How many days this week did you do your morning pages? Has reading your pages changed your writing? Are you still allowing yourself to write them freely? Reading and parsing out my morning pages really messed with my head. On purpose, I had done my morning pages in such a way that I couldn't see the prior day's page when I opened it up to do today's page because I didn't want to be affected by what I had written the day before. So I really truly had not read through anything I had written until I went back in, I think it was in week 9 or 10. They asked me to just review recurring themes in the morning pages that I've been writing. And I've talked about this before, but I'll mention it again. I noticed a really clear, consistent pattern of waking up needing to self-soothe. And it was disturbing to realize that it's not just those 12 weeks that I've been writing those morning pages. That's been my standard for as long as I can remember. I have woken up and needed to remind myself that I'm safe. And the reasons for that are rich and varied, and I think you can find a lot of those within the poetry that I post on Substack. But the larger point is that I don't want that to be my life anymore. And I noticed myself do something interesting. I noticed that rather than continuing to engage with the morning pages because they're illuminating, my body told me these morning pages are a threat to your stability, so you better not do them anymore. And I started to feel this deep, unreasonable resistance to doing the pages that wasn't there before. Because I didn't want to see myself in that way. I didn't want to be that creature that was waking up terrified. And that led me to take a look at my sleep habits because objectively my life is safe. I live in a safe home. I'm really lucky in that way. I live in a peaceful home. So I'm not just safe in my body, I'm safe in my mind. I don't have to fight for stability where I live. So there's no reason in the moment for me to wake up panicked. So it has to be something other than that. So I started monitoring how my sleep was going, and I was really disturbed to discover that my sleep schedule looked a lot like what it would look like if I were parenting a newborn. I was waking up every hour or so and never really settling down into a deep sleep where I could actually restore. So it really helped me understand where it was coming from, and it helped me to take it easier on myself, to realize that it wasn't just me failing in my coping mechanisms, it was me needing to adjust my sleep so that it could actually be sleep and not just fitful semi-rest. Because sleep deprivation is something people use to torture other people with. Like, it really will mess with your head. Anyone who's been sleep deprived knows that. So the point of all this is that I only managed to get my body to sit down and write morning pages one day this week because I didn't want to let the the animal reaction win. I didn't want to use old coping skills, which are just run from the threat. Because things aren't always even a threat. Sometimes things are just reminders of old threats. So that is a long way of saying I did one day of morning pages, and it was hard earned, but I'm glad I did it. Question 2. Did you do your artist date this week? Let yourself do an extra one. What did you do? How did it feel? This I have been getting better about, or more willing to engage with, I'll say. I found a gorgeous yarn store pretty close to where I live, which is always something that makes me feel like I've found a home. And so I have been taking trips over there to get yarn to make beanies with, because that's a project I've always enjoyed. And I'm also finding that the less time I spend scrolling on my phone, the less panicky I wake up feeling in the morning. Who knew? So in an effort to spend less time scrolling Substack in the name of seeking inspiration, but really in actuality numbing out. So in an effort to avoid doing that, I have taken up knitting again, which is something that I have done ever since I was a very small little person. And it's something that brings me a lot of comfort. So the artist dates have been leading me over to that yarn shop. And it's just a really nice reminder that kind of anywhere you go, you can find a little pocket of people being creative and queer and doing their own thing, regardless of what anyone else thinks. And that's great. Question 3. Did you experience any synchronicity this week? I think so. I find myself just like better able to anticipate the needs of those around me, the people that I'm responsible for meeting needs for anyway. I'm finding myself less surprised by just the events of daily life. I'm finding myself better able to cope with things. So I don't think any of that is necessarily synchronicity, but I think it's an example of just life flowing a little easier, and that feels good. And 4, were there any other issues this week that you consider significant for your recovery? And that leads me into what I want to talk about next, which is that I really spent a lot of time staring down one of the pages of tasks this week. And the title of that task was The Awful Truth. Answer the following questions. And this is one that I think you'll recall in the last episode. I looked at it and I said, I think I'm going to go over this next week, because I knew I just wanted time to chew on it. So I sat with it a little bit, and I want to go over what I came up with now. Tell the truth. What habit do you have that gets in the way of your creativity? And I think I have a habit of assuming I have less in the tank than I really do. I have a habit of assuming, I can't overschedule myself because I'll get overwhelmed. But sometimes that's not true. Sometimes I can handle it just fine. And so I think I have a habit of assuming that I can't, rather than actually sitting with the request and thinking, this is not something that I usually do, but perhaps it's within my wheelhouse as well. Tell the truth. What do you think might be a problem? It is. What do I think might be a problem? I don't know. I mean, I think it's a little bit of a problem that I'm caught in this strange middle place where I'm experiencing some real success in my day job, and I really enjoy my day job. I manage a cafe, and I get to use just like a lot of different skills that I've gained over the years, and I get to be like a coach and a kind of a big sister and team captain figure, and that feels really good. But at the same time, it does use some of the same mental capacity that I draw on to run my Substack and all of the creative things that I do underneath that umbrella. And that feels like, a problem of privilege, but a problem nonetheless. Because I recall the excellent character Ron Swanson's quote, "Never half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing." And I feel like I'm trying to half-ass success in two fields right now. What do you plan to do about the habit or problem? Well, I think the real answer is just time management, because I do have a healthy adult amount of energy. I have learned how to care for myself better than I used to in the past, so I have more staying power than I used to in the day. So I think the answer is to remember that I have tools, that I worked really hard in therapy to learn those tools, and that I'm not being self-indulgent by using them. So things like creating a visual schedule in Excel or Google Sheets, something like that. That's not being extra. That's maybe something that I personally would need, and that's okay. What is your payoff in holding on to this block? The payoff is that I never really have to take a big swing, that I can be average in a couple things, and never have to reckon with really going hard and trying to go all the way with something and seeing how far I can get. And I don't feel like I have any excuse not to do that, because I have already proven to myself that I can. In what feels like a past life, I pursued and achieved a master's degree in classical flute performance, which was something that, really started when I was about 10 years old and took me until I was in my mid-20s, because I just barreled straight from high school to undergrad to grad school with no breathing room, which I would not recommend. But I have done the big swing. I have done the all the way. And so I know it's possible, and I know that's not what I'm doing right now. Tell the truth. Which friends make you doubt yourself? The self-doubt is yours already, but they trigger it. I think the friends who trigger my self-doubt through no fault of their own are the ones who have seen me at my very, very lowest. I struggled for a long time to find stable and predictable mental health, and it's something I'm really proud that I stuck with, and I'm really proud that I'm still here today, because that wasn't always a guarantee. And I have friends in my life who stuck around for those times, and they weren't afraid of it, and they weren't judgmental, and they saw me for the good person having a bad time that I was. And that is a really vulnerable position to be in. And lucky for me, those are good people, and they have been good friends to me. But I can't deny that I wish nobody knew that I had ever experienced that kind of life or health situation. I wish that nobody knew that I was, capable of such low lows. And sometimes I do wonder, like, do they take me seriously as a healthy person, seeing all the things that they saw? Next question. Tell the truth. Which friends believe in you and your talent? The talent is yours, but they make you feel it. I think those same friends that I was just talking about are also the ones that remind me, like, hey, just because you had low lows, that is not all you are. You are an immensely talented and creative and awesome person, is something they've made it clear to me because I have very good friends. And so they make it clear that they think I have value both as a person and as a creative individual. And then beyond that, I've also made several really lovely friends through Substack that have become people that I just text with throughout the day. They've just become part of my daily life, and that feels like a real gift to be able to find people out in the world who get me and who I never would have encountered otherwise. What is the payoff in keeping your destructive friends? If the answer is I like them, the next question is why? And I think this is something that I've already reckoned with in the past. It was a hard series of boundary setting and blocking and muting that I had to do to purge all of the destructive people out of my life. And this happened, after I got sober from alcohol and I was able to see my life more clearly for the first time in a long time. So I'm proud to say I don't have any destructive friends because I have a no destructive people policy in my life now. I would vastly prefer solitude to having somebody in my life that's creating chaos. Same thing with hotheads. I have a no hotheads policy. If somebody can't communicate without raising their voice, they're just going to have to go communicate with somebody else. Those are the rules. And because of that, yeah, I don't have this bullshit to deal with anymore. But I could see how if I were still reckoning with that, I would not be in the place I am creating all of this cool stuff that I'm creating right now. Because it takes a lot of creative energy to deal with chaotic people because they're unpredictable. Which constructive habits do your constructive friends share with your constructive self? Yeah, I think the friends I have who are, constructive in my life and inspiring are the ones who are stable. These are the people who they show up for work on time. They're reliable. They're able to say yes or no with a clear conscience to something. They're not overcommitting themselves for the glory of the full schedule. They are realistic about their needs and what they can offer the world. And because they are so aware of their own needs and what it takes to take care of themselves, they don't resent that willingness to care for yourself that they might find in someone else. They don't judge people who are taking care of themselves. They see that as a good thing. And that's something that I really like being around, is people who encourage rest and time away from work and unplugging and eating healthy and hydrating and all of these things that for someone raised in a healthy home, or someone who, is not neurodivergent, these are all easy things to do. These are habits, routine. It's not something you have to think about. But for somebody with a brain like mine, I need a little reminder now and then. So these people are helpful in that way. So this was just a bit of a reckoning I had looking at this, because it showed me both that I have come a long way in terms of creating a healthy life for myself, but also that part of me is really still stuck in that mindset of, oh my God, I am unsafe at every turn and everyone is out to get me and I need to be in survival mode always. That's just not the case anymore. It just isn't. And I'm really grateful for that. And it would be so cool if I could really step into that feeling and live my life as though I am safe, because I am. So all of that being said, let's now check out week 11 of The Artist's Way, which is titled Recovering a Sense of Autonomy. Here we go. Acceptance. I am an artist. As an artist, I may need a different mix of stability and flow from other people. I may find that a 9-to-5 job steadies me and leaves me freer to create. Or I may find that a 9-to-5 drains me of energy and leaves me unable to create. I must experiment with what works for me. An artist's cash flow is typically erratic. No law says we must be broke all the time, but the odds are good we may be broke some of the time. Good work will sometimes not sell. People will buy but not pay promptly. The market may be rotten even when the work is great. I cannot control these factors. Being true to the inner artist often results in work that sells, but not always. I have to free myself from determining my value and the value of my work by my work's market value. The idea that money validates my credibility is very hard to shake. If money determines real art, then Gauguin was a charlatan. As an artist, I may never have a home that looks like town and country, or I may. On the other hand, I may have a book of poems, a song, a piece of performance art, a film. I must learn that as an artist, my credibility lies with me, God, and my work. In other words, if I have a poem to write, I need to write that poem, whether it will sell or not. I need to create what wants to be created. I cannot plan a career to unfold in a sensible direction dictated by cash flow and marketing strategies. Those things are fine, but too much attention to them can stifle the child within, who gets scared and angered when continually put off. Children, as we all know, do not deal well with later, not now. Yeah, I think this is great in theory. As someone who crashed headlong into attending a music conservatory completely on student loans, maybe somebody should have encouraged me to consider the financial aspect a little bit. I think balance is key. Since my artist is a child, the natural child within, I must make some concessions to its sense of timing. Some concessions does not mean total irresponsibility. What it means is letting the artist have quality time, knowing that if I let it do what it wants to do, it will cooperate with me in doing what I need to do. Sometimes I will write badly, draw badly, paint badly, perform badly. I have a right to do that to get to the other side. Creativity is its own reward. As an artist, I must be very careful to surround myself with people who nurture my artist, not people who try to overly domesticate it for my own good. Certain friendships will kick off my artistic imagination and others will deaden it. Yeah, I learned the hard way that there are friends you want to take your fledgling creative ideas to, and there are friends that you should really wait to share it with until it is locked and already on the market and they can't say that it can't be done. Because some people will just try to convince you that what you want to do is impossible because they themselves can't visualize how you're going to do it. And it's not good enough for them that you can see it in your mind. Because they can't see it yet, it can't be done. And people like that are just fucking toxic nightmares to creatives. And they may mean well, but they can get fucked. I may be a good cook, a rotten housekeeper, and a strong artist. I am messy, disorganized, except as it pertains to writing, a demon for creative detail, and not real interested in details like polished shoes and floors. To a large degree, my life is my art, and when it gets dull, so does my work. As an artist, I may poke into what other people think of as dead ends. A punk band that I mysteriously fall for. A piece of gospel music that hooks my inner ear. A piece of red silk. I just like and add to a nice outfit, thereby ruining it. As an artist, I may frizz my hair or wear weird clothes. I may spend too much money on perfume in a pretty blue bottle, even though the perfume stinks because the bottle lets me write about Paris in the 30s. As an artist, I write whether I think it's any good or not. I shoot movies other people may hate. I sketch bad sketches to say, I was in this room. I was happy. It was May and I was meeting somebody I wanted to meet. Yeah. I think that's pretty similar to why I write and post poems on Substack. It's mostly just to say, like, hey, I was here. Like, this was what one person experienced today. And those are the kinds of memoir that I really enjoy reading, are the ones where it's like, hey, like, this is just what happened. You know? And maybe that person isn't the most extraordinary person, but it kind of doesn't matter. Because when you zoom in to a person level, you know, a person is a person is a person, regardless of whether they're famous or not. As an artist, my self-respect comes from doing the work. One performance at a time, one gig at a time, one painting at a time. 2.5 years to make one 90-minute piece of film. 5 drafts of one play. 2 years working on a musical. Throughout it all, daily, I show up at the morning pages and I write about my ugly curtains, my rotten haircut, my delight in the way the light hits the trees on the morning run. I'm realizing now that I think part of my hesitance with the morning pages is that I don't want to write about what I consider silly stuff. And realizing now that what I consider to be silly stuff is stuff like my emotions, thoughts and feelings, small observations about my day. I'm always trying to get down to like the deep foundational whatever behind everything that sometimes I forget to just record the minutia. And I'm not sure who I'm afraid of boring with it, because it's really only for me. As an artist, I do not need to be rich, but I do need to be richly supported. I cannot allow my emotional and intellectual life to stagnate, or the work will show it. My life will show it. My temperament will show it. If I don't create, I get crabby. As an artist, I can literally die from boredom. I kill myself when I fail to nurture my artist child because I am acting like somebody else's idea of an adult. Ooh. That's a big one for me. I find myself often getting caught up in the idea of, am I being an adult correctly? And that's just like hilariously impossible. The more I nurture my artist child, the more adult I am able to appear. Spoiling my artist means it will let me type a business letter. Ignoring my artist means a grinding depression. There is a connection between self-nurturing and self-respect. If I allow myself to be bullied and cowed by other people's urges for me to be more normal or more nice, I sell myself out. They may like me better, feel more comfortable with my more conventional appearance or behavior, but I will hate myself. Hating myself, I may lash out at myself and others. Yeah, this reminds me a lot of masking. You know, it's really easy as a neurodivergent person to convince myself that everybody wants me to mask, but I am actually a less pleasant person to be around when I'm masking because I am so uncomfortable, and it only lasts so long before it starts to become obvious that something's wrong. And you know, I've gotten feedback that it feels disingenuous and it's a little unsettling. So, you know, I just, this is a great way to, I feel like she does a good job of explaining why the masking is draining. There is a connection between self-nurturing and self-respect. If I allow myself to, I said that already. If I sabotage my artist, I can well expect an eating binge, a sex binge, a temper binge. Check the relationship between these behaviors for yourself. When we are not creating, artists are not always very normal or very nice to ourselves or to others. Creativity is oxygen for our souls. Cutting off our creativity makes us savage. We react like we are being choked. There is a real rage that surfaces when we are interfered with on a level that involves picking lint off of us and fixing us up. When well-meaning parents and friends push marriage or 9 to 5 or anything on us that doesn't evolve in a way that allows for our art to continue, we will react as if we are fighting for our lives, and we are. Yeah, I grew up in a pretty conservative area where it was so assumed that everyone was straight and that everyone would grow up and get married to each other and everyone would grow up and have babies that I was just a fish in water. I couldn't even see the water for it being all around me. And it took me leaving that area and then many years of living out of that area to start to see that, sure, that is one way you can live your life, but it's not the only way. And it's not the only correct way either. To be an artist is to recognize the particular, to appreciate the peculiar, to allow a sense of play in your relationship to accepted standards, to ask the question why. To be an artist is to risk admitting that much of what is money, property, and prestige strikes you as just a little silly. To be an artist is to acknowledge the astonishing. It is to allow the wrong piece in a room if we like it. It is to hang on to a weird coat that makes us happy. It is to not keep trying to be something that we aren't. If you are happier writing than not writing, painting than not painting, singing than not singing, acting than not acting, directing than not directing, for God's sake, let yourself do it. To kill your dreams because they are irresponsible is to be irresponsible to yourself. Credibility lies with you and God, not with the vote of your friends and acquaintances. The Creator made us creative. Our creativity is our gift from God. Our use of it is our gift to God. Accepting this bargain is the beginning of true self-acceptance. Yeah. I recall my senior year of high school when I knew for sure that I wanted to go study music, and I was pretty sure that I could get in. But I knew that I would only get in if I worked as hard as I possibly could because it was very competitive. So I would often spend the time after school where, I had to wait a while for the school bus to bring me home because it was a small town. The school bus driver gets there to get you when he gets you. So there was a period of time between when the last class ended and when the school bus would come to bring me home. And I would just find a space to practice. We had one little practice room in our band room, and I would try to get in there. I would tuck myself away and just practice a little bit. And I did that most days. And then one day, one of my classmates asked me, "Hey, why do you practice so much?" And I didn't really even understand her question because she actually was attempting to get into the same music school as me, just for voice, not for flute. And I found myself wondering, wait, why am I practicing? What else would I be doing? I need to get out of this hellhole of a small town, and this is the way I'm going to do it. What are you doing? And I just remember thinking oh, she and I are thinking in very different ways. And that is all to say that I was happier pursuing music than anything else. And even though nobody around me really got what I was doing, nobody really got in my way either. They kind of just let me do my thing undisturbed, which was a little lonely, but ultimately what I needed. Success. Creativity is a spiritual practice. It is not something that can be perfected, finished, and set aside. It is my experience that we reach plateaus of creative attainment only to have a certain restlessness set in. Yes, we are successful. Yes, we have made it, but... In other words, just when we get there, there disappears. Dissatisfied with our accomplishments, however lofty, we are once again confronted with our creative self and its hungers. The questions we have just laid to rest now rear their heads again. What are we going to do now? This unfinished quality, this restless appetite for further exploration tests us. We are asked to expand in order that we not contract. Evading this commitment, an evasion that tempts us all, leads straight to stagnation, discontent, spiritual discomfort. Can't I rest, we wonder? In a word, the answer is no. As artists, we are spiritual sharks. The ruthless truth is that if we don't keep moving, we sink to the bottom and die. The choice is very simple. We can insist on resting on our laurels, or we can begin anew. The stringent requirement of a sustained creative life is the humility to start again, to begin anew. It is this willingness to once more be a beginner that distinguishes a creative career. Yeah, this is something that was made clear to me in grad school. In a music conservatory at a grad school level, everyone around you is an expert. And in an environment, in a room where everyone is an expert, it can either be very easy or very difficult to be vulnerable and admit that you don't know something. And in the environment I was in, it was seen as a moral failing not to know something. It wasn't seen as an opportunity to learn and grow, or to maybe, bond with someone else who also doesn't know, because surely you're not the only one who lacks this knowledge and wants it. No, none of that. And so what I found was, when I tried to take on that persona of I know everything, I am also an expert just like everyone around me, I found myself ossifying into this creature who couldn't play and engage with new ideas, and I stopped learning very much. I just stopped getting any better. So I can't say that I recommend that approach. I think that what she's saying here, that this idea of the beginner's mind is really important. The idea of considering that perhaps there's more to learn. Continuing on. A friend of mine, a master in his field, finds himself uncomfortably committed years in advance of his availability. He is in an enviable position on a business level, but he finds it increasingly perilous to his artistic health. When the wheel turns and the project committed to 3 years ago must be executed, can he do it with imagination and his initial enthusiasm? The honest answer is often an uncomfortable no. And so, at great financial cost, he has begun cutting back his future commitments, investing in the riskier but more rewarding gain of artistic integrity. Yeah, I cannot stress how important it is not to be that person who overcommits for the glory of it. Because it's just so exhausting trying to figure out if someone is saying yes, but it's a yes now and a no later, or if it's a yes and I can actually count on it for real. Not all of us, always, can muster such creative courage in the face of fiscal temptation, but we can try. We can at least be willing. As artists, we are travelers, too heavily encumbered by our worldly dignity, too invested in our stations and positions, we are unable to yield to our spiritual leadings. We insist on a straight and narrow when the artist's way is a spiral path. Invested in the outer trappings of a career, we can place that investment above our inner guidance. Deciding to play by the numbers, we lose our commitment to counting ourselves and our own goals worthy. Creativity is not a business, although it may generate much business. An artist cannot replicate a prior success indefinitely. Those who attempt to work too long with formula, even their own formula, eventually leach themselves of their creative truths. Oh, yeah. That's something I'm noticing as well now that I've taken knitting back up after some time away, is that when I am working on my writing for Substack and I reach a point where I'm like, I don't really feel like I have much in the tank anymore, but I still want that dopamine hit of doing something creative. I have this other thing that's totally different and that's more physical than mental, and it's still creative and it's still scratching that itch, but it's also letting my writing creative brain rest when it needs to rest. And that's great. Embedded as we often are in the business milieu of our art, it is tempting to guarantee what we cannot deliver. Good work that duplicates the good work that has gone before. Successful movies generate a business demand for sequels. Successful books generate a demand for further similar books. Painters pass through popular periods in their work and may be urged to linger there. For potters, composers, choreographers, the problem is the same. As artists, we are asked to repeat ourselves and expand on the market we have built. Sometimes this is possible for us, other times it's not. As a successful artist, the trick is to not mortgage the future too heavily. If the house in the Hamptons costs 2 years of creative misery cranking out a promised project just for cash, that house is an expensive luxury. This is not to say that editors should stop planning seasons or that studios should scuttle their business bottom line. It is to say that the many creatives laboring in fiscal settings should remember to commit themselves not only to projects that smack of the sure thing, but also to those riskier projects that call to their creative souls. You don't need to overturn a successful career in order to find creative fulfillment. It is necessary to overturn each day's schedule slightly to allow for those small adjustments in daily trajectory that, over the long haul, alter the course and the satisfactions of our careers. Yeah, I think this is in the same vein as what I was talking about before, with feeling like I'm half-assing two things instead of just whole-assing one thing. This means writing your morning pages. Taking your artist date. But I run a studio, you say, or whatever other thing it is you must do. People depend on me. I say all the more reason to depend on yourself and protect your own creativity. If we ignore our inner commitment, the cost rapidly becomes apparent in the outer world. A certain lackluster tone, a rote inevitability, evicts creative excitement from our lives and eventually our finances. Attempting to ensure our finances by playing it safe, we lose our cutting edge. As the promised projects diverge further and further from our inner leanings, a certain deep artistic weariness sets in. We must summon our enthusiasm at gunpoint instead of reveling in each day's creative task. Artists can and do responsibly meet the demands of their business partnerships. What is more difficult and more critical is for us as artists to continue to meet the inner demand of our own artistic growth. In short, as success comes to us, we must be vigilant. Any success postulated on a permanent artistic plateau dooms us and it to failure. Oh boy. Yeah. And I mean, how many behind the music documentaries have we seen that have shown this, right? I mean, like, this is not a new lesson, but still one we need to remember. The Zen of sports. Most blocked creatives are cerebral beings. We think of all the things we want to do but can't. Early in recovery, we next think of all the things we want to do but don't. In order to effect a real recovery, one that lasts, we need to move out of the head and into a body of work. To do this, we must first of all move into the body. Again, this is a matter that requires acceptance. Creativity requires action, and part of that action must be physical. It is one of the pitfalls of Westerners adopting Eastern meditation techniques to bliss out and render ourselves high but dysfunctional. We lose our grounding and with it our capacity to act in the world. In the pursuit of higher consciousness, we render ourselves unconscious in a new way. Exercise combats this spiritually induced dysfunction. Yeah, this is kind of the, okay, I'm sure I'm going to get lit up in the comments for this, but this is kind of how the whole, ketamine craze strikes me. It strikes me as people just, really cherry-picking stuff from wellness that's not, it just really seems like people just want to get fucked up and in the name of wellness, and I just think it's a bunch of bullshit. Anyway, returning to the notion of ourselves as a spiritual radio set, we need enough energy to raise a strong signal. This is where walking comes in. What we are after here is a moving meditation. This means one where the act of motion puts us into the now and helps us to stop spinning. I think for me, this is what knitting does. It's a moving meditation. It's repetitive, but engaging at the same time. It's right in that sweet spot. 20 minutes a day is sufficient. The object is to stretch your mind more than your body, so there doesn't need to be an emphasis on fitness, although eventual fitness is a likely result. The goal is to connect to a world outside of us, to lose the obsessive self-focus of self-exploration and simply explore. One quickly notes that when the mind is focused on other, the self often comes into a far more accurate focus. It is 6:30 a.m. when the great blue heron stirs from its resting place in the short grasses and rises above the river on huge rhythmic wings. The bird sees Jenny down below. Jenny down below sees the bird. The pumping of her legs carries her in an effortless floating stride. Her spirit soars up to the heron and chirps. "Hello, good morning, lovely, isn't it?" At this time, in this place, they are kindred spirits. Both are wild and free and happy in their motion, in the movement of the winds, the clouds, the trees. It is 4:30 p.m. when Jenny's boss looms in the doorway to her office. The new account is being picky and wants still more changes in her copy. Can she handle that? Yes, Jenny says. She can because she is still soaring on the glad energy of her morning's run. That heron, the steely blue of it flashing silver as it made that great banking turn. Jenny would not call herself an athlete. She does not run in marathons. She does not run in cheery singles groups. Although her distances have gradually increased and her thighs have gradually decreased, she does not run for fitness. Jenny runs for her soul, not her body. It is the fitness of her spirit that sets the tone of her days, changes their timbre from strained to effortless. I run for perspective, says Jenny. When the client picks at her copy, Jenny detaches and soars above her frustration like the great blue heron. It is not that she doesn't care. It is that she has a new perspective, a bird's eye view, on the place of her tribulations in the universe. Eve Babbitts is a novelist and a swimmer. Tall, blonde, and as generously curved as the freeway cloverleaf of her native Los Angeles, Babbitts swims in order to direct the traffic flow of her own overcrowded mind. Swimming, she says, is a wonderful sport for a writer. Every day, as she swims the aquamarine oblong of her neighborhood pool, her mind dives deep into itself, past the weeds and clutter of its everyday concerns. What editor is late with a check, why the typist persists in making so many errors, and down to a quiet green pool of inspiration. That rhythmic, repetitive action transfers the locus of the brain's energies from the logic to the artist hemisphere. It is there that inspiration bubbles up, untrammeled by the constraints of logic. Yeah, this idea of just getting out of your head and staying in the moment is really something I'm struggling with as we speak. As I read to you, I'm finding myself really wanting to fidget because my back hurts, which I think is fine, but I'm also finding myself wanting to flip ahead and just like, oh, how much is left? Like, what have you got? I want to skim ahead. I want to see what's going on. I can't just settle into the paragraph that I'm sharing with you right now. And I think that's just interesting to notice. Martha is a carpenter and a long-distance bicyclist. Carpentry challenges her daily to find innovative solutions to construction problems, to untangle the intricacies of a complicated design situation requiring a simple answer to a complicated question. How can I build in workspace without using floor space when I'm done working? Or, is there some kind of cabinet that could fit in this corner and around this wall without seeming too modern for my furniture? Pedaling from her home in the suburbs to her job in the city, Martha encounters her answers to these questions. In much the same way that a red-winged blackbird will suddenly take flight and cross her line of vision, Martha will be pedaling when louvered doors will flash as the design solution. Pumping her bicycle rhythmically and repetitively, Martha also pumps the well of her creativity. It is my time to let my imagination roam and work out problems, Martha says. Solutions just come. Somehow I am freed to free associate and things begin to fall into place. I had an experience like this recently as well. Once I started knitting, I noticed that my mind would settle enough to come up with new ideas, and I was actually able to come up with a fiction poem, which I normally don't write. I normally write from a place of deep, dark childhood drama memoir. That's my brand. I'm aware of it. But I was able to settle enough to just consider something different. And I was knitting, and then I started to just imagine this cave down deep in the earth filled with sparkling jewels, and that evolved into a poem that I posted recently called Rubies Indeed. And I will share the link to that in the description of this if you want to check that out. Yeah, so I think I can really identify with that. Oh gosh, lost my place. When she bicycles, Martha has a sense not only of her own motion, but also of the motion of God through the universe. She remembers riding alone on Route 22 in upstate New York. The sky was an azure bowl. The cornfields were green and gold. Yeah, that area is remote. There is nothing there. It is flat as a pancake. Farms, cows, nothing. The ribbon of black asphalt that Martha rode seemed to her to head straight into the heart of God. Silence, a blue sky, a black ribbon of highway, God, and the wind. When I ride, especially at dusk and at early morning, I feel God. I am able to meditate more in motion than sitting still. Being alone, having the freedom to go wherever I want, having the wind blow, riding alone in that wind allows me to center myself. I feel God so closely that my spirit sings. Yeah, I think they call that flow state, I think. Exercise teaches the rewards of process. It teaches the sense of satisfaction over small tasks well done. Jenny, running, extends herself and learns to tap into an unexpected inner resource. Martha would call that power God, but whatever it answers to, exercise seems to call it forth in other circumstances when we mistrust our personal strength. Rather than scotch a creative project when it frustrates us, we learn to move through the difficulty. Life is a series of hurdles, says Libby, a painter whose sport is horseback riding. I used to see it as a series of obstacles or roadblocks. Now they are hurdles and challenges. How well am I taking them? In the daily schooling of her horse, teaching her to think before she jumps, to pace herself properly, Libby has learned the same skills for her own life. Yeah, it's sort of like how I spent enough time encouraging my younger staff to believe in themselves and to trust themselves that I started to believe my own bullshit after a while, and I started to believe in myself and trust myself too. Part of this learned creative patience has to do with connecting to a sense of universal creativity. Riding, my rational mind switches off, she says. I am reduced to feeling, to being a participant. When you ride through a field of grass and little flecks of fluff from the wheat ears float around you, the feeling makes your heart sing. What a rooster tail of snow sparkles in the sun in your wake. That makes your heart sing. These moments of intense feeling have taught me to be aware of other moments in my life as they occur. When I feel that singing feeling with a man and know that I have also felt it in a field of grass and a field of snow, then I know that it is really my own capacity to feel that I am celebrating. It is not only a sense of communion with nature that creates a singing in the heart. An endorphin-induced natural high is one of the byproducts of exercise itself. A runner may feel the same celebratory sense of well-being pounding a dirty city street that Libby finds as she posts rhythmically along a country trail. Yeah. I think for me, this is a busy day work in the cafe. It's a lot of gentle, continuous motion. And I find that, especially when I'm just working the espresso machine, it's pretty repetitive, and it's easy to just settle into the groove and just feel my body and turn off my mind. It's really nice. God is in his heaven, all's right with the world, is how Robert Browning characterized this feeling in his long narrative poem Pippa Passes. It is no coincidence that Pippa experienced this feeling as she was walking. Not everyone can afford to ride a horse or even a 10-speed bicycle. Many of us must rely on our feet for transportation and for recreation. Like Jenny, we can take up running, or we might make walking our sport. As an artist, walking offers the added benefit of sensory saturation. Things do not whiz by. We really see them. In a sense, insight follows from sight. We fill the well and later tap it more easily. Yeah, I prefer to walk for this exact reason. I find that, my knees have retired themselves from running, thank you very much. But yeah, riding in a car is really hard to take in the environment. It's just going by so dang fast. But walking, I feel like I can walk at the speed I can process, and that feels really good. Jerry is a confirmed city dweller. His country walks are limited to perusing window boxes and pocket gardens. Jerry has learned that in cities, people are the scenery. He has also learned to look up, not down, and to admire the frippery and friezes that often grace buildings that look quite, pedestrian at street level. As he roves the city canyons, Jerry has found a whole panoply of scenic attractions. There is the orange marmalade cat that sits in the window above the window box with both pink and red geraniums. There is the copper church roof gone murky green that glistens silver in rainstorms. An ornately inlaid marble foyer can be glimpsed through the doors of one midtown office building. On another block, someone has sunk a lucky horseshoe in civic concrete. A miniature Statue of Liberty soars unexpectedly atop a dignified brick facade. Jerry feels at liberty himself, roaming the city streets on tireless feet. This reminds me a lot of a poem I wrote about a particular neighborhood in Boston, and I'm going to link to that poem as well. This courtyard, that cobbled walkway, Jerry gathers urban visual delights the same way his primordial ancestors gathered this nut, that berry. They gathered food. He gathers food for thought. Exercise, much maligned as mindless activity among certain intellectuals, turns out to be thought-provoking instead. As we said before, we learn by going where we have to go. Exercise is often the going that moves us from stagnation to inspiration, from problem to solution, from self-pity to self-respect. We do learn by going. We learn we are stronger than we thought. We learn to look at things with a new perspective. We learn to solve our problems by tapping our own inner resources and listening for inspiration, not only from others but from ourselves. Seemingly without effort, our answers come while we swim or stride or ride or run. By definition, this is one of the fruits of exercise. Exercise, the act of bringing into play or realizing in action, from Webster's 9th. Next section, building your artist's altar. Morning pages are meditation, a practice that brings you to your creativity and your creator God. In order to stay easily and happily creative, we need to stay spiritually centered. This is easier to do if we allow ourselves centering rituals. It is important that we devise these ourselves from the elements that feel holy and happy to us. Many blocked creatives grew up in punitively religious homes. Accurate! For us to stay happily and easily creative, we need to heal from this, from becoming spiritually centered through creative rituals of our own. A spiritual room or even a spiritual corner is an excellent way to do this. This haven can be a corner of a room, a nook under the stairs, even a window ledge. It is a reminder and an acknowledgement of the fact that our Creator unfolds our creativity. Fill it with things that make you happy. Remember that your artist is fed by images. We need to unlearn our old notion that spirituality and sensuality don't mix. An artist's altar should be a sensory experience. We are meant to celebrate the good things of this earth. Pretty leaves, rocks, candles, sea treasures. All these remind us of our Creator. Small rituals, self-devised, are good for the soul. Burning incense while reading affirmations or writing them, lighting a candle, dancing to drum music, holding a smooth rock, and listening to a Gregorian chant. All of these tactile physical techniques reinforce spiritual growth. Remember, the artist child speaks the language of the soul. Music, dance, scent, shells. Your artist's altar to the creator should be fun to look at, even silly. Remember how much little kids like gaudy stuff. Your artist is a little kid, so... that was nice. I liked that. I think there's a lot of stuff in here that I was sort of halfway to realizing, and it felt good to read it aloud. So that was pretty cool. So next week, we are going to talk about the final week in this program. We're almost up to week 12. Can you believe it? So next week, we are going to explore the last week titled Recovering a Sense of Faith. And I will also share with you what is coming up in the following weeks after we finish this limited podcast series, because I have something fun planned for the next series, I should say. So thank you for tuning in and listening to me go over week 11 titled Recovering a Sense of Autonomy. I can't wait to join you next week when we go over the last week of tasks and explore what's coming in the future. So thank you for joining, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.